All right, guys, we are out here. We are in Flagstaff, as mentioned before. Let's talk about the time of day. So right now it is 10 after 11. Sunrise was 5:19-ish. So we're 6 hours into the day. The sun is pretty much straight overhead. Your shots aren't going to look as good as if you would do it early morning, sunrise, sunset, because the harsh light will not look good on your subject. Right now we are looking at a osprey nest. So I got mama and chick, and I've taken a few pictures, and I will show you that here in a little bit to show you the difference between taking your shots, as stated before, like early morning, sunrise, late afternoon, sunset, where the light is soft and you have this beautiful orange glow on everything. So what I'm going to show you is how harsh the light is. Part of the bird is in light and then the other part is in shadow, and the contrast between the two is so significant that the picture your image won't look really good. It'll just look like an average snapshot. And I'm going to post it on here now so you can see. And if you look, the back part of the osprey, the mama there, is in pretty good light. And then the face and the chick you can see is in shadow. And depending on where you put the sun, you can either have the entire subject lit where there's no shadow, or like in this instant, it's kind of like a angle. So any shadows are going to be really dark, really contrasty. So that's not what you want. That is definitely not what you want, because your image, your subject won't look good. So I'm out here, I'm actually waiting for Dad to come to the nest with some food. And while we're out here waiting, I also wanted to talk about some of the gear that you would use or not even think of while you're doing any kind of wildlife, whether it's birds or land-based animals. The one thing that I would highly suggest is a pair of binoculars. And the reason being is that you don't want to have your face plastered onto the camera, because your field of view is very small. So anything that happens outside that, you're not really going to see. So with a pair of binoculars, you have a bigger field of view and you're able to scan quicker. And then once you have your subject that you want to photograph, set your binoculars down, get onto your camera, and then start taking images. I'm sorry. There's a lot of traffic here right now. Murphy's Law. Once you start recording anything and everything that can go wrong, more than likely will go wrong. So I hope the audio is still good. All right, so where were we? Binoculars, right? So a good pair of binoculars, they don't have to be super expensive. It's just something to be able to reach out and scan the horizon or the treetops or sky, you know, anything that you can't see with your normal eye, and you don't want to have your face plastered into the camera, like I said, because your field of view is narrower and you're going to miss a lot of activity that's out there. We got another car coming. So we still got mama and chick up there. And you can see the chick is pretty hot. Mom is trying to get some shade on her baby there. All right, this is another good time to stop and talk about camera settings. So right now, I'm actually set at ISO auto, so I don't have to worry about that. And then I am at 1/2000th of a second at f7.1. Now the reason my shutter speed is so fast is that I am actually waiting for Dad to come in and swoop in. So when I catch him, I want to catch him and freeze the action. But right now, as it is, mama and baby are just sitting on the treetop there in the nest, and they're not really moving around so much. Now, when you have your your shutter speed up, 2000, 2500, 3200th of a second, your ISO is going to crank up. And the reason being is because it needs to let more light in. Now, when you have subjects that aren't moving very fast, you can get away with having your shutter speed at 1/500th of a second. I really wouldn't recommend anything slower than that, because any kind of movement that the birds or any animal has, then you end up getting motion blur, and then your picture won't be sharp. Now, there are instances where you want to have like an artistic effect, and you could slow your shutter speed down and get that motion blur. That's kind of personal preference, and that's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Me personally, I like to keep my subjects sharp, so any kind of movement, I don't really want to blur. With the exception that I do every so often, I will allow the wingtips to blur a little bit, so I'll be at 1/1200, 1/1500 of a second, just to get the wings to blur a little bit. But other than that, I tend to want to keep my subjects sharp in the frame. So with Dad not anywhere around that I could see, I'm going to slow my shutter speed down to about 1/500th of a second, and that will take my ISO down to about, well, let's see here, we can get it to cooperate. About ISO 200, compared to if I'm at 1/2000th of a second, my ISO is at ISO 800. Which, with this much light out, ISO 800 really isn't going to be a problem. It doesn't matter what camera you have, whether it's an older one or a newer one. So I'm shooting with a Sony a7R III. It's, by standards now, it is a pretty old camera, so it doesn't handle high ISOs very well. But the fact that there's this much light, the noise level isn't going to be as high as if the light levels were lower. And now with Topaz denoise, and now Lightroom has a denoise function, that really isn't so much of an issue anymore. You still don't want to shoot at ISOs that are so bad that your picture just looks so grainy, because it doesn't matter what software you use, you're just not going to be able to recover. Like you're going to have to push your software beyond its limits, and when it renders your picture, your image out, everything is just going to look like it's kind of like an oil painting effect, and that's no good. So you do have to learn the limits of your camera as far as light level and noise floor for your particular camera. Ooh, we got babies chirping at mama right now. So right now I'm back up to 1/2000th of a second, f7.1, and then my f-stop is at 7.1. And right now, Mom is trying to shade the chick from the sun. which being in Flagstaff, so the temperature right now is 88, so it's not too bad. So back home where I'm at, it's already over 100 degrees. So it's cooler here, but still pretty warm considering for the area. So let's talk about positioning, because I had mentioned it a little bit earlier. Now, when you position yourself for bird photography, you want to keep two things in mind. One is the position of the sun. As I was telling you earlier, if you have the sun at an angle, whether it's midday or early morning, late afternoon, where depending on harsh light or soft light, the takeaway from that is that your subject is going to be either half lit and half in shade, or if you have the sun positioned behind you and you're taking images that way, your subject's going to be fully illuminated. So you won't have to worry about shadows, and then trying to fix that in post, you're not going to be able to. So that's the first thing, is you want to make sure the sun is behind you. That way your subject is fully illuminated. And the best time of day, like I said, would be either early morning, sunrise, sunset. That way the light is pleasing on the subject, where it's soft and it's not harsh like this. Second thing you want to take into consideration for positioning yourself is the wind. Now, just like an airplane or a helicopter, birds will take off and land into the wind. So if the wind is hitting you in the face, then what's going to happen is the birds are going to land or take off flying away from you. So basically you're going to get butt shots. Those aren't very interesting. So the best thing to do is have the wind at your back, and then the birds will come towards you, whether they land or they take off. And those would be the best position. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you're not going to be able to do both. So if that's the case, for me personally, I would rather have a good illuminated subject and then try to angle myself as best I can to where the wind is in my back. Now, for instance, right now, the wind is at my back. So when the daddy osprey comes in, he's going to land towards me on the nest. Now, right now, the sun is basically straight up above me, so the lighting isn't going to be the best, and that's why I mentioned in the early mornings or late afternoon, where the light is nice and soft. So I'm gonna pop up some images here from the nest here between mom and chick and show you what I mean as far as the harsh lighting on your subject. This is not the best time of day. You're not gonna get good images because of it. So if you look on both the mom and the chick, you can see that the kind of the right side is being illuminated by the sun, and it is very bright. And then if you look into the shadows, you can see that it is very dark. Sorry, more traffic coming through. So you can see the shadows are very dark. Now, if the sun were behind me shining onto the birds, shadows wouldn't be much of an issue. Now, on that note, because it is the middle of the day and the sun is pretty much at its brightest and its peak, it's not a very good or very pleasing image. And the reason being is because the light is very harsh. In general, soft light is more pleasing for your subjects. And it's no different for animals. All right, so we're gonna cut it here, and then we're gonna go back to, actually we'll come back to this location because I got a feeling that we'll probably run into Dad maybe later on, because as of right now, we're going almost an hour being out here and Dad's still not around. But we're gonna come back more towards sunset and we can show you the difference in the lighting. You know, it won't be so harsh like this and your subject will look much more pleasing. All right, so until then, we'll see you.